Hi everyone, my name is Matt Scribner. I'm a senior pre-med student here at St. John's and am this year's CSBSJU Pre-Med Club President. Today we're going to be talking about the MCAT. I personally have taken the MCAT before, and our goal with this presentation is to give you guys some of the information many of us upperclassmen and individuals who have taken it before wish we had known going into it. The most beneficial resources from these presentations that you will likely want to focus on will be some study resource recommendations I discuss later on, as well as information about the format and what MCAT test day looks like. If there's something specific you're looking for, feel free to skip ahead to one of the later videos in this series. All the information you technically need is online. However, many students can find the research process time-consuming and stressful, especially if it's something you're doing within the context of a busy pre-med workload. And watching these videos will hopefully replace your need to do excessive research. So let's begin. For starters, what is the MCAT? The MCAT is the medical college admissions test, and it's designed to test your knowledge on the information you've hopefully been learning throughout your undergraduate experience. It also challenges you to apply this knowledge upon being presented with scientific literature. But what are you more specifically tested on? I'll be utilizing the more commonly referred to titles for each section, but on the slides you can see the longer-winded names as you will see them in official testing media. And as the slide indicates, these are in the order you will see them on test day. The first section of the MCAT is the Chem Phys section. Next is the CARS section, which stands for Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, which overall is a fancy way of describing a reading comprehension test. Then comes the Biochem section, and lastly, the Psych-Soc section. These slides will lay out the exact technical percentages of how much of each topic is supposed to be represented on each section of the test. You're welcome to look at those percentages. However, the more important thing I'd like to highlight is the ratio of discrete questions to passage-based questions. So, as you can see here, there are 59 questions on the Chem Phys section. Only 15 of these questions are standalone questions, otherwise known as discrete questions. This means there are only 15 questions that are not tied to information presented to you in a passage format. So let's take a look at some examples of discrete versus passage-based questions. This is an example of what a discrete question looks like, and this slide is pretty accurate to what a discrete question looks like on the actual MCAT. But then you move on to passage-based questions. And passage-based questions, as you could assume, will give you a more dense passage full of information regarding a topic and its related subtopics. Then the subsequent questions are going to be questions based on the passage and your ability to interpret its info. MCAT providers will claim that everything you need to answer the question can be found in the passage. However, without adequate knowledge in the relevant scientific principles, as well as if you haven't spent enough time reading and interpreting scientific passages, you're pretty much a fish out of water when it comes to answering these questions in a timely manner. As you saw in the previous slide, you only have 95 minutes to answer 59 questions, 44 of which entail a lot of reading, meaning you have to be very efficient. This slide isn't really an accurate example of what you will see on test day. It's just overlapping part of an example passage with an example question. There will typically be more text to read in an actual passage-based question. Luckily, for every long-winded passage, you will always have multiple questions to answer. So you'll be reading a large text, but that large text is going to relate to multiple questions at a time. After the Chem Phys section, you move on to the CARS section. The CARS section is the only section that contains 53 questions and only 90 minutes, relative to the standard 59 questions and 95 minutes of the other three sections. It is also the only section to exclusively contain passage-based questions. The passages you'll be reading can range from a variety of different topics, such as the humanities, art, history, politics, and so on. Initially, when I was going into the MCAT, I assumed the cars section would be roughly identical to reading sections of other standardized tests, such as the ACT I took in high school and did really well on. However, the thought process was pretty misleading. I ended up finding the cars section to be much more of a struggle than anticipated. And this tends to come from this concept known as reasoning beyond the text. As you can see in the bottom right, the MCAT will challenge you to read into the author's beliefs, intentions, and how the author would respond given hypothetical follow-up information. After the cars section comes the biochem section, which has the same amount of questions and minutes as the chem phys section. That's standard 59 questions in 95 minutes. And then the test ends on the psych-soc section with, again, that 59 questions and 95 minutes to answer them. In total, of the 230 questions on the MCAT, only 45 of them are standalone, discrete questions. This amounts to 6 hours and 15 minutes of time spent testing, and as you'll see here in a second, only 50 minutes of downtime maximum. I cannot stress enough that this test is unlike anything most students have likely seen before. The MCAT is both a significant amount of time spent testing, while still coming with the challenge of feeling as though you are pressed for time. And especially when first studying, you will not feel as though you have enough time to complete all the questions. This is why dedicated MCAT study is so important, and you don't just need to study for the topics of the MCAT, you need to practice for the cognitive and even physical demands of test day. Moving left to right, once again, these are the sections of the MCAT in order. After the first section, you are allotted a 10-minute break. After the second section, you get a 30-minute break, typically referred to as your lunch break. Then after the third section, you will get one last 10-minute break before ending on the psych-soc section. At the end of each section, you will raise your hand to be escorted out of the room and will have access to a locker of the belongings you brought with you. Testing centers are strict about what they allow you to have, so you'll only be able to bring and have access to things like food, beverages, and medications. Some things that many test centers don't allow include digital watches, hats, scarves, jewelry, calculators, notes, reading materials, and of course electronics such as your phone. If you are someone that has to bring your phone to the testing center with you, maybe you need to access a ride after the test, the testing centers will hold on to it for you until you're done testing. And if it applies to you, consult the list of pre-approved religious garments on the AAMC website. An important thing to know before test day is that in between sections, you are responsible for keeping track of your time. When I took the MCAT, the only means I had for tracking time was the analog clock on the wall. Once I exited the computer testing area, that I only was able to see once I exited the computer testing area. So to play it safe, I usually didn't use the entirety of my break time, because if you go over, it will cut into your testing time on the next section of the exam. For example, if you take a 12-minute break for your first break after the Chem Phys section, you will lose a couple of minutes of testing on the cars section. And one more fun little surprise, you are not allowed to use a calculator on test day. You cannot bring one, and they don't provide one. This doesn't mean that the math on the MCAT is particularly easy. You will need to be comfortable with powers of 10, logarithms, algebra, trigonometry, exponents, all without the assistance of the calculators you likely used throughout your undergraduate career. This means that for many of you, you will have to acquire new skills that you likely didn't need to practice prior to the MCAT, such as quickly and efficiently being able to round difficult to work with numbers. Just another reason why practice is so essential. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.